There is a deeply irritating stage of personal growth where you know exactly what you are doing, but you continue to do it anyway. You know you're people pleasing. You see it happening, and you can probably name the pattern in real time. Someone asks for something, and your entire body is telling you, fuck no. But then your mouth says, sure. And somewhere in the back of your brain, there's this tiny, exhausted version of you. It's like, oh, for fuck's sake, are we doing this again? You know you do this. You've read about people pleasing. You could probably write a whole essay on it. You understand boundaries. You understand your own boundaries. And you know other people's emotions are not automatically your responsibility. You may have been able to explain this exact concept beautifully to somebody else. And then a person is disappointed with you, and suddenly all of that knowledge leaves the building. So now, on top of the people pleasing, you're annoyed with yourself because I know better, which sounds perfectly logical. If I know the pattern is unhealthy, why am I still doing it? But there's something important missing from that question. Knowing what a pattern is does not automatically remove the reason it developed. And people-pleasing gets so much harder to change when we treat it like an embarrassing little habit instead of asking, what has this pattern been trying to accomplish? Because maybe it was not stupidity. Maybe it worked. Maybe it preserved something important. Belonging, approval, predictability, connection, safety, or usefulness. And maybe saying yes made relationships feel more stable. Maybe being easy to need felt safer than having needs. Maybe anticipating what everybody else wanted helped you avoid the conflict. And maybe being useful became one of the ways you knew how to belong. That does not mean, though, that you have to keep doing it. It means the pattern makes more sense when we understand the job that it's been doing. And that is what we are talking about today. Not, how do I become someone who never people pleases again? But, what is one people-pleasing behavior in my life trying to preserve? Because once you can see that, you have a much better chance of responding differently when the pattern actually shows up. So people-pleasing does not always look like being sweet and agreeable. Sometimes it's saying yes when you really mean no. Sometimes it's changing your opinion halfway through a conversation because you can tell that yours is not landing well. Sometimes it's rewriting the text 6 times so there's absolutely no conceivable way the other person could interpret it as rude. Sometimes it's volunteering before anyone asks because waiting to see whether someone is disappointed feels worse. Sometimes it's over-explaining or apologizing before making a request. You're softening every statement, managing everybody else's mood, taking responsibility for fixing tension or problems that you did not create. Avoiding asking for what you need because then someone else might have to adjust. Maybe you are extremely capable of setting a boundary, in theory. So you can say, someone else's disappointment does not mean my boundary is wrong. Wonderful. Then your mother sounds slightly annoyed on the phone and your nervous system says, emergency meeting, we may have destroyed the family. And this is where knowing better can become its own form of shame. Because now you think, I should be past this. I know what I'm doing. Why am I still like this? But identifying the pattern and feeling safe enough to stop using it are not the same process. So here's the part that most people tend to miss. Patterns repeat because at some point they did something. They solved something, or they reduced something, or they protected something. They got you something that you needed. Or they helped you avoid something that felt dangerous or painful or destabilizing or costly. That does not mean that the behavior was consciously designed. 5-year-old you probably did not open a strategic planning document called 5-Year Roadmap for Chronic Self-Abandonment. You adapted because we as humans do that. You noticed what produced connection, what created tension, what got approval, what caused someone to withdraw, what made the room feel safer, what made adults easier to predict, what version of you got praised, and what version of you got called difficult. So you learned. And if being helpful, agreeable, quiet, impressive, flexible, emotionally easy, or highly attuned to everyone else made life more manageable, your system had a reason to keep doing it. That is why I do not love talking about people-pleasing as though you simply picked up a bad habit and forgot to put it down. Sometimes it was an adaptation. Sometimes it was the most intelligent one, maybe because it helped you belong. But that does not mean that it belongs in every relationship you have now. But we can acknowledge that it had a function, and a pattern can make sense and still need to change. Both can absolutely be true. So what might people-pleasing be protecting? Let's look at a few possibilities. There's belonging. Maybe people-pleasing helped you feel included. And if you learned that connection came through being agreeable or useful or low maintenance or easy to like, then disappointing someone can feel bigger than they did not like my answer. It can feel like my place here is at risk. And if belonging has historically felt conditional, of course your nervous system pays attention to anything that threatens it. There's approval. Maybe being liked or praised became evidence that you were doing life correctly because you were the good one, the responsible one, the mature one, the one adults could rely on, and the one who did not cause problems. So saying no is not just saying no, it bumps into an identity. If I am not the person who helps, who am I? If someone thinks I'm selfish, what does that really mean about me? 3, there's predictability. People-pleasing can also be an attempt to manage outcomes. If I anticipate what you want, if I can keep you happy, if I explain myself correctly, if I avoid conflict, maybe I can predict what happens next. And that can feel a lot safer than tolerating another person's unpredictable response. Sometimes we are not people-pleasing because we desperately need everyone to adore us. We are trying to keep the relational environment stable. Number 4, safety. And yes, sometimes the stakes were higher. Maybe the disagreement genuinely was unsafe. Maybe another person's anger was frightening. Maybe saying no led to punishment, ridicule, withdrawal, aggression, or retaliation. And maybe keeping the peace was not just some cute personality quirk. It was protection. And that, my friend, is why context matters. Because not every people-pleasing pattern comes from the same place. And we do not need to invent a traumatic origin story if there is not one. We just need to ask honestly, what did this behavior help me avoid? Then there's also usefulness. And this one can be a little bit sneaky. Because maybe being needed became how you knew that you mattered. Because you helped, you fixed, you remembered, you organized, and you anticipated, and you became the person that everybody depends on. And that can feel so fucking good. Being useful is not a bad thing. Helping people is not a bad thing. The question is whether usefulness has become the price of belonging. Can you still feel valuable when you have nothing to offer? Can someone be disappointed in what you can give and you still trust the relationship? Can you need something without immediately paying everyone back? That is different. And this, my friend, explains why awareness can feel so fucking frustrating. You can understand perfectly well that a behavior is people-pleasing, but in the actual moment, your system may still be responding to the old stakes. Someone is disappointed, and your brain knows. They are allowed to be disappointed, but your body may be hearing the connection is in danger. Someone asks you for something that you don't have the capacity for, and your brain knows, I can say no. But another part of you may be hearing, if I stop being useful, they will stop wanting me here. You might receive a slightly shorter than usual text, and your rational brain says, could mean literally anything. Meanwhile, you're mentally reviewing every interaction since 2014, because apparently we have now opened a full-blown investigation. Knowing the thought is inaccurate does not instantly make the pattern irrelevant. There is one reason. Just stop caring about what people think is profoundly unhelpful advice. We care what people think because relationships matter. Belonging matters, connection matters. The work is not becoming completely indifferent to other humans. The work is noticing when another person's approval has become more authoritative than your own needs, limits, values, or perception. I also want to be careful not to pathologize consideration. Changing your behavior because another person matters to you is not automatically people-pleasing. Sometimes you compromise because relationships involve compromise. Sometimes you do something inconvenient because you love someone. Sometimes you help even when you would rather just stay on the couch. And sometimes you choose not to say every thought you have because we live in a society that has opinions about everything. Consideration is not self-abandonment. The difference is not always the behavior. Two people can both say yes. One says yes because I do not especially want to do this, but this person matters to me and I choose to show up. The other says yes while internally screaming no because if I disappoint them, I will feel unsafe, guilty, selfish, or terrified that they will stop loving me. Same yes, different thought process. And that is why simply creating rules like say no more often does not tell you enough. The question is, what is making the decision? Is it your values, your actual desire to contribute, your capacity, or is it the fear of what happens if you do not keep the other person happy? So instead of asking yourself, why am I still people-pleasing? Try ask, what is this people-pleasing trying to protect? Because that question changes the tone entirely. Now you're not standing over the pattern yelling, we talked about this. You're getting the information. Maybe the yes is protecting you from guilt. Maybe the explanation is protecting you from being misunderstood. Maybe the automatic offer to help is protecting your identity as useful. And maybe avoiding the conversation protects the predictability. Maybe apologizing protects belonging. And that brings about the second question. Does this situation actually require that protection now? Sometimes yes, because there may be real consequences. Power dynamics exist. Financial dependence exists. Workplace dynamics exist. Difficult relationships exist. And we're not going to pretend that every situation is equally safe just because boundaries are trendy on Instagram. But sometimes the old strategy is showing up in a context where you have more choice than you once did. And this is where a new response becomes possible. So I want you to choose one people-pleasing behavior this week. Just one. Not your entire relational history. We have time. So maybe yours is saying yes immediately, over-explaining your no, checking whether someone is upset, apologizing for needing something, offering help before checking your capacity, changing your opinion to match the room, fixing tension immediately. Pick one. And then ask yourself, what am I afraid will happen if I respond differently? Don't give the correct answer, give the real one. They're going to be mad. They'll think I'm selfish. They'll stop asking me. They won't need me. It will be awkward. I'm going to feel guilty. What if they leave? What if they misunderstand me? Whatever is actually there. And then ask, what is this behavior trying to preserve? Approval, belonging, predictability, safety, usefulness, connection, a particular identity that you've created? And then, is that outcome actually threatened here, or is it because it feels familiar? And then finally, what would a 10% different response look like? Not, how do I become a completely transformed human by Tuesday? 10%. Maybe you wait 10 minutes before saying yes. Maybe instead of giving 6 reasons, you just give 1. Maybe you ask yourself whether you actually want to help before volunteering. Maybe you let the text sit for an hour before assuming that someone is angry. And maybe you let another person be mildly disappointed without immediately trying to repair it. The goal is not on dramatic rebellion. The goal is building another option. And here's something worth knowing. When a protective pattern changes, you may not immediately feel better. You might feel worse. You might set the boundary and feel guilty. Say no and feel anxious. Stop over-explaining and spend the next 3 hours wondering whether you sound rude. Let someone solve their own problem and feel like a terrible friend. That does not automatically mean the new behavior was wrong. Sometimes it means the old behavior used to protect you from exactly this feeling. If people-pleasing reduced guilt, then not people-pleasing may expose guilt. If over-explaining reduced uncertainty, then saying less is going to expose uncertainty. And if being useful secured approval, then not volunteering may expose the fear, will I still matter? And that, my friend, is the deeper work. Not simply stopping the behavior, learning what appears when you do. and realizing that you may be able to tolerate that experience now without immediately returning to the old strategy. So if you know that you people please and you're frustrated that awareness has not magically eliminated it, I want you to stop using that as evidence that you are failing. Awareness is one thing. Understanding the pattern is another. Responding differently while the old fear is active is another. And the repetition matters. And I know that repetition like that can be entirely frustrating. And yes, it is going to feel uncomfortable. I'm not going to lie to you about that. Because you're not trying to become someone who never cares about whether another person is upset. You're becoming more able to notice, I care that they are disappointed, and I still need my capacity to count. I want their approval, and I still disagree. I value this relationship, and I do not want to abandon myself to keep it. That is a different kind of belonging, one where you are allowed to remain in the room too. So pick one behavior, ask what it protects, and see if you can give yourself one small additional option the next time it shows up. Not because the old pattern was stupid, because maybe it did its job, and maybe you're ready to find out whether you still need to do that job every single time. So if you're interested in learning more, come join me over on Substack and talk more about why maybe people-pleasing wasn't stupidity, because maybe it worked. And we're going to go a little bit deeper into belonging and approval and predictability, safety, and usefulness, and what changes when we stop treating the patterns like proof that we're weak and start understanding why those patterns became useful in the first place. So if this brought a specific pattern to mind, come read that next. Let me know in the comments. But before you do anything else, I would ask you to write down, what is my people-pleasing trying to protect? Start there, and I'll talk to you soon.